Former National Security Advisor John Bolton joined me for This Week on Capitol Hill, my weekend broadcast on the Salem Radio Network, to discuss the future of the Middle East and what may be ahead after Iran's nuclear program was dealt a devastating blow by both Israel and the U.S. I want to share part of that enlightening conversation with you right now. So let's talk about that. In 1979, the rise of the Islamic regime, that was probably the last major movement in the geopolitical sphere in the Middle East of this magnitude that we're seeing today. What does the U.S. need to do to change the direction and ensure 50 years from now there's maybe more of a peaceful Middle East?
Right. I think that as long as the current regime in Tehran stays in power, that there's really no chance for sustainable peace and security in the region. Even if we got a government in Iran that was peaceful and concerned only about their own internal affairs, of course there would be other factors, other risks in the Middle East. But you don't even get to that problem until you solve the problem of Iran. So I think that actually conditions inside Iran today are very favorable for regime change. I think the regime is extremely unpopular on economic reasons, on social reasons, on various forms of repression that they've been engaged in. I think the opposition inside and outside Iran among the Iranian diaspora really has the regime in a very difficult place. In addition, of course, the Ayatollah Khamenei, who is only the second supreme leader, is in his mid-80s. He's not well, and you can already see the signs of a potentially very destabilizing succession challenge below him. So I think we should try and help out. Regime change is a bad word in many circles. In this case, it does not come anywhere close to meaning boots on the ground. I think we can provide support to the opposition and hope that it will be primarily an internal Iranian affair.
Yeah, that's very important to point out, Ambassador, because people think of regime change, they think Afghanistan, they think boots on the ground, they think long-term American commitment. This could be done primarily through sanctions, keeping sanctions in place, because we know that even this week there was discussion of lifting some sanctions so China could buy oil from Iran. And that's been a major source of revenue for Iran, is through China. Keeping those sanctions in place and only removing them as we see positive developments within Iran, correct?
Right, I agree entirely with what you've just said. The regime of the Ayatollahs right now is on its back, and we owe a lot of that to Israel for pummeling the terrorist surrogates, these radical extremists in Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. The dictatorial Assad regime in Syria has fallen. We don't know necessarily enough about the new government there, but it certainly didn't do anything to come to Iran's aid during the Israeli attack. This is potentially a moment when you really could see change in Iran to help alleviate circumstances and the threat of terrorism all around the region. Very interesting. German Chancellor Merz said at the G7 meeting earlier this week that this is sort of the Washington gaffe, speaking the truth when you don't think anybody's listening. But he said, the Israelis have been doing the dirty work of the West against the Iranian regime, this very radical Islamist state that threatens everybody in the region, Arab and Jew and Christian alike, and threatens Europe as well as the U.S. with terrorism. So I think there's beginning of awareness that maybe the regime in Tehran is far more vulnerable than many people thought.
Ambassador, I see, for those that are watching, I see over your shoulder a chessboard. This is not checkers, this is chess. When we look at the Middle East, what's the next move for America as we look at the entire landscape of the Middle East?
Well, I think there's a possibility that we'll see further diplomatic recognition for Israel granted by Arab states, more Abraham Accords, the first of which were negotiated during Trump's first term. I think that would be very important. I think these are steps toward a more normal, a more peaceful Middle East. And I think it's a signal really around the whole region and globally that things are continuing to change there at a very rapid rate. We should support that. And at the same time, we should keep a very, very close eye through intelligence and cooperation with others on what's happening inside Iran to make sure they're not trying to revive that nuclear weapons program.
A minute and a half left, Ambassador. How is China and Russia interpreting these events, do you think?
Well, I think having seen the bunker buster bombs in operation, you can bet that Chinese and Russian military analysts are poring over the data they can get, and that the political leaderships in Beijing and Moscow have seen a use of American power here in support of one of our closest allies, Israel, against one of the worst threats we face, the Iranian nuclear program. Clear and decisive action. It may not have been everything it could have been, but this is something that is not like the 4 years of the Biden administration, that's for sure. This is a way of demonstrating the American deterrent in action. And the point of the deterrent is to prevent conflict, to brush our adversaries back. I hope it's had that effect.
30 seconds. Does it affect the view of Taiwan?
Yeah, I think that coming to Israel's side as we did should remind the Chinese that among the American people, there are very strong feelings of support for the free government on Taiwan. And I hope that gets Chinese decision makers to think twice or three times before they do anything that might pose a threat to Taiwan.
Ambassador John Bolton, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Well, thanks again for having me.
Again, that was my conversation with former ambassador to the United Nations and National Security Advisor John Bolton on the weekend program this week on Capitol Hill.